Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 2025 PIBBSS Symposium. Our speaker, Max, will be discussing civilizational superintelligence.
Thanks, Carlo. So yeah, the full title of my talk is the Civilizational Superintelligence Alignment Problem. It's quite a mouthful. The premise is that what we're actually trying to do when we speak about alignment is steer the objectives of emergent agents across multiple system scales and substrates, rather than just AI systems in isolation. And so coming from a philosophical background, I'm trying to do what's called conceptual engineering, which is refine the concepts which we use. And so I'm trying to encapsulate what I'm seeing as a socio-technical complex systems or like multi-agent turn in the AI safety discourse. So I'm kind of trying to start from like first principles and ask like, what is the alignment problem and what should it be? And so I'm going to be taking like a highly interdisciplinary perspective. And methodologically, I'm going to deconstruct and then reconstruct the AI alignment problem. And the purpose of this is to try and draw out exactly what AI alignment means and what it demands to the fullest extent possible. So I'm trying to put forward what you could call a maximalist or holistic account of AI alignment. Now, the first thing that I'm doing when I'm approaching this question is looking at how is this term used currently. So the base term tends to be used without much qualification, and it tends to be used in many conflicting ways. So there's not much rigor in how people are differentiating what they mean. And so what I'm trying to achieve is a level of greater clarity when people are using this term. So firstly, the AI alignment problem is fundamentally a reinvention of the principal agent problem in economics, or it's a subtype or a special type of principal agent problem. So that's where you have a principal, in this case, humanity, and an agent, in this case, artificial superintelligence. And the agent is acting on behalf of the goals or the values of the principal. And so this frame that's more fundamental to the AI alignment problem is like recurring throughout like natural, human, and artificial systems. And the principal agent problem kind of functions in like 3 steps. So you have a principal that's aiming at a certain objective, and then it aligns an agent with that same aiming process, and then the agent will then take measures to achieve that objective. Now, in the discourse, there you can differentiate between a user or operator alignment problem, where the AI agent or system will simply pursue the goal of whichever entity is deploying it, be that an individual or an institution. Then there's an even broader like societal alignment problem of, does that like cybernetic system combining humans and machines actually act in the interest of society writ large? And then even broader than that, humanity as a whole, like it's extrapolated and cohered goals. And then even beyond that, there's criticism that the alignment discourse tends to speak of human values, and it neglects like non-human animals. And so sentiocentric or sentient alignment is expanding the moral circle to moral patients beyond just humans. And all of these kind of interact and conflict with one another. So there's this real question of like, how do you reconcile what the user wants to do versus like its wider externalities on society, and complex like moral philosophical questions around like wild animal welfare, like farmed animal welfare, and human welfare, and there'll be trade-offs depending on how you weight the goal system. So this way of thinking about things is captured quite well in this notion of alignment interfaces, that a lot of the technical research that's purely talking about how you align like a single AI with a single user. And there's this risk that AI developers could simply align the most powerful AI systems that they develop with their own interests. And so then there's a wider context of how do the AI developers interact with like governments, and then how do those governments interact with civilization as a whole. So there's this nested hierarchy of interfaces. So like typically in like the early literature from like Nick Bostrom, Stuart Russell, Eliezer Yudkowsky, that they're talking about superintelligence and humanity. So it's this single alignment. And this has kind of been disputed because it's perhaps a more plausible scenario is that there'll be many less powerful general intelligences rather than a single superintelligence. And then you have to look at how does that multi-agent system interact. So it tends to complicate things. And further, humanity is not a unified principle for the AI to act on behalf of. There are like deep ideological and cultural differences and like pluralism. And so how would an AI, or how does the network of AIs navigate between different conflicts of interests and the interests of different human groups? So you see this kind of expansion of the alignment problem from this very like high level single to like a multi-principle and multi-agent alignment problem. So yeah, there's this quite you can kind of differentiate between like the meta scale and then the macro scale, which is like there'll be human groups and institutions like political parties, religions, nation states, corporations that will employ AI systems, and they'll probably have more powerful systems than citizens. Pardon me. And so their functioning is like an institutional user, even though those macro scale entities aren't single unified entities in the same way in the same way that humans are. They do have their own emergent agendas, and so practically for they do exhibit like goal directed agency. Then on the micro scale, we're talking about like individual humans with AI assistants. Perhaps there'll be individual humans at the head of institutions that have their own AI assistants, and also AI, like broader ecosystems of AI agents that manage the corporation. So far we've been talking about this kind of bidirectional alignment. This unidirectional alignment of AIs being aligned with humans. But then this kind of begs the question: well, like, are humans aligned? And so we might speak of a human alignment problem. And so here there's this kind of expansion of the space of possible intelligent agents from beyond just AI agents to humans as forms of general intelligences and also collective intelligences, and then also like states and corporations. And there's a kind of like sci-fi fantasy Lovecraftian mythos that you can kind of see, where there's like the machines and the organics and the krakens. And these are kind of ways of conceptualizing different kinds of agencies. This has kind of been encapsulated within the literature as what you might call entity alignment studies. And AI alignment is just a subset of that. And so I think like broadly, there are like two types of alignment here. We can think about like vertical alignment. So that's the relationship between individual humans and then the groups that they're a part of on the micro to macro interface. And then there's also vertical alignment between the macro and the meta. So like states and then the civilization. As well as vertical alignment, there's also horizontal alignment. So that's between agents at the same organizational level. So like individual humans and individual humans, or human or like states and other states. And the same is true of AI systems, that you might have like a superintelligence that would deploy sub agents, and those subagents will interact with each other, and they'll interact with the macro agent. And so what you end up here is these kind of like structures forming. And this has led to some research in the space referring to multi-scale alignment, that we don't just have to align like AIs or to align humans, but we have to align like everything all at once. And we have to solve these alignment problems at all of the interfaces, like vertically and horizontally. There we go. So what you end up is, if we go back to kind of the first depiction, it's just like superintelligence and humanity, and like a single arrow in relationship. Now you end up with this like massive complexity of like vertical and horizontal relations from like the micro, macro to meta scale. And again, this is true of both like human systems and AI systems. And I think so far we've been kind of, if you look at the two images, we've been looking at these hierarchies in isolation. But it's what will actually happen if the user alignment problem is solved is that these two will merge, and you end up with like AI and human dyads, where the AI will function as the agent and the human the principal. Yeah. So it ends up looking more like this. I think another thing that's underappreciated is what I refer to as the reverse alignment problem, that AIs will then be aligning humans with their objectives. So if you look at the case of a benevolent superintelligence, perhaps one that like solves moral philosophy and arrives at like the one true moral theory, it would then have this goal of trying to align a morally confused humanity towards the true moral theory that it's arrived at. And there's a question of like how, like what's the actual method that it would do that? So it could do it like coercively, where it like eliminates people that have the wrong moral philosophy on like utilitarian grounds, that it should just then replace them with a population of people that do enact the correct theory. Or it could try and like guide humanity over like an intergenerational educational process to try and make people realize their like how their culture is deficient in certain ways. This might also occur on like the macro level, so that you might have a state that has like an AI oracle that communicates a certain goal, like 5-year plan for the state, and perhaps the state, like the human principles, don't quite understand this plan, and they're not very convinced, and it's purely because there's an epistemic distance between the AI, which can manage the complexity of this plan, and like human minds that can't. And so then the AI system has this imperative, like to how to then change the minds of humans and align it with its objective. This could also happen on the micro level with humans and their AI assistants. In very kind of like, to use a trivial example, perhaps you want to use your AI assistant to like buy some kind of sugary food, and the AI assistant knows that your like second order preferences, like what you would want for yourself, is not to actually buy that. And so it will then try and act as like a therapist or a friend or like your future self, that is like trying to convince you not to actually go through with this. And perhaps you could have instituted some kind of rule where it will actually prohibit you. And so, yeah, I think there's this, I think it's stemming from kind of deep assumptions in Enlightenment philosophy that humans are the only agents in the world. And this is both not true pre-AI, but certainly post-AI agents. It will be that we suddenly have these goal-directed entities, and we will be the subject of alignment, not just the aligners. And so I think the kind of core and like critical insight that this like extended conception of alignment gets at is what I refer to as like the misaligned world hypothesis, which is that if our human collective intelligences have misaligned goals currently, then AIs will simply inherit those existing misalignments and then accelerate the negative externalities that those processes generate. And so this is like a radical shift from merely looking at how do we solve the technical problem to how do we solve this much larger governance problem that actually predates AI. And AI is just kind of being thrown into the mix and like integrated. Yeah, so I'm going to then kind of come back to what the kind of ethos of PIBBSS is, which is trying to identify underlying principles that govern intelligent behavior. And here, I think we could speak of what I coin as like utopia, like a universal theory of the principles of intelligence alignment. That this is like the most ambitious goal of PIBBSS style research. And here, essentially, what I'm doing is like trying to generalize the AI safety framework to other intelligent agents. So we can apply this notion of alignment and then further like capability control and interpretability to other kinds of intelligent agents. So for instance, neuroscience is basically doing like human interpretability. Social science also, or like economists are trying to do like interpretability on the economic system. They're trying to predict economic events, and that's obviously a very like soft science. And so one instance that this could be applied is in the case of like human misuse, which is actually a form of like human misalignment, that you could align AIs to a human that has misaligned goals. And so this kind of returns to the tension between user alignment and societal alignment. In the case of human misuse, the dominant methods that propose tend to be capability control. So Bostrom's high-tech surveillance state that like monitors people's activities and limits their access to dangerous technologies. That's like applying capability control to the human population. Bostrom kind of makes some remarks about how you could align the human population, but says that there'll be kind of there will always be this apocalyptic demographic unless we like radically change human nature. And so he tends to naturalize the problem and dismiss it as like a plausible way of solving human misuse. So on a very high level, we might talk about not just aligning like humans or AIs or civilization, but the entire space of optimization and intelligence. And this is where I think on like, again, trying to go as meta as possible, we might delineate between like a universal intelligence alignment problem, which is merely trying to steer goal-directed intelligent agency in the universe. I said merely when it's actually kind of the grandest project. And that could also include like alien civilizations if you want to get speculative, but it's fundamentally this, it's this substrate neutral formulation. Let me move on. Yeah, so again, I'm probably kind of reiterating some of the structures I was presenting earlier. But I think presenting it in this way is also useful. So you can kind of see this hierarchy of agents forming, and you can even go lower than humans and AI agents to say that even those agents that we typically think of like, these are definitely agents, and maybe macro entities like states and corporations exhibit like agent-like properties, but they're not agents in the same sense. You can even criticize this model by saying that like humans aren't unified and they might have multiple selves, or like so typically like Freud said we have like the ego, the id, and the superego, and like these are kind of in internal conflict. Or in the AI literature, there's discourse around meso-optimizers, that even within AI agents, they will spin up sub-processes and sub-optimizers to achieve their goals, and there's this inner alignment problem. Yeah, and I think broadly speaking, I would say that as you go up this scale, the optimization power increases. And as you go down, the level of unified agency decreases. I think there is a tendency in the AI discourse to not make this distinction, and to kind of advocate for like a strong emergence thesis that entities like capitalism or like Moloch, that these are equally as agentic as like humans are. And I think this is a form of alienation where we're like projecting our own agency and like externalizing it, and when actually it is human agents that are like powering these collective intelligence systems. So this is a kind of like diagram of what this like space of emergent optimization looks like. And so if we're trying to influence the future, we need to kind of cover this entire space. So again, another kind of representation. I kind of like thinking in these kind of like through these kind of geometric diagrams. Perhaps other people don't find them as useful. Yeah, I've kind of already been through this. Yeah, so there is an interesting dynamic when you get to the interface between the macro and the meta, where the meta process, so if you have states competing, that generates an arms race, and then like Moloch emerges as like an emergent representation of a process that no one controls, and so agency kind of breaks down, but still kind of functionally exists. And so I think that's why we're kind of drawing on these like mythological and animal and animist metaphysics to try and explain it. Okay. So one of my my main project throughout PIBBSS, aside from doing this kind of thinking and trying to write things out, was I tried to really comprehensively map the literature around this. And so I created this website called Cybersynergetic. And this, it has a kind of like sci-fi, cyberpunk aesthetic to it. And it was kind of a sister site to an existing mapping project called Retrochronic, which was specifically mapping Nick Land's thesis that capitalism is AI. Whereas my project was both looking at this capitalism as AI model, but also widening the scope to other kinds of intelligent agents. And so this is Retrochronic. So stylistically, I was kind of mirroring and like improving upon their style. And I think the real like value of this project is that it serves as a central archive that's documenting the conceptual explosion in the discourse surrounding AI alignment, and looking at all the cases where this frame has been extended to states, corporations, capitalism, humanity, etc. And in this way, I kind of situate it perhaps quite with some grandiosity as like a techno-cultural artifact, that there's this current moment and wave that we're witnessing in the discourse and in civilization more widely, and this website is capturing this. It's really getting to the zeitgeist. And I think like now that this site is established, I'm hoping that it will function as a gateway for people to also see this paradigm shift within AI alignment. Typically, people have come across like one or two thinkers that will have spoken about like civilizational alignment or collective intelligence, and they tend not to have an idea of like how vast the existing literature on this subject is. And so by collating it all, I think it solves this this gap. and hopefully it will contribute to interdisciplinary research in this area. Yeah, so aside from a kind of more general goal, I think there are particular things that the literature map reveals. So there are certain mental models and like critical views within the literature that I've managed to extract. So for instance, there's been some kind of expressed aversion to extending alignment to humans, that it's somehow inappropriate to use this technical frame, like humans can't be aligned, or like it's, if we are to align humans, it's not going to function in the same way that you would align an AI model. And so it's almost has this technocratic valence to it. What else do I want to discuss? Yeah, so the title of the project, CyberSyn, is a homage to the cybernetician Stafford Beer, who he had a project in the 1970s where he was trying to design an alternative economic system. So it was a kind of socialist experiment using very primitive computers, and it was the dawn of like cybernetics as like an applied discipline, which was, it kind of emerged as a precursor to the field of AI, looking at the symmetries between humans and machines. And it kind of faded away and was replaced by like complex systems theory, control theory, and also AI. And so I was trying to kind of return to the roots of this more interdisciplinary approach to intelligence. In terms of the actual like content of the site, I structured it around 11 categories of extended framings. Some of them I think were particularly novel, were the notion of like self-alignment, which is probably very widespread in like the spiritual traditions. But it was interesting to see that people like Brian Johnson have like adopted this notion of self-alignment from the AI discourse and are like popularizing it, and also how this notion of self-alignment for humans problematizes AI alignment, that humans aren't internally self-aligned, and so like how do we expect to align AIs with our goals? And so it kind of gestures towards a more dynamic process of like interaction between humans and AIs. In total, I brought together like over 120 sources, so it's quite a large compilation. And within those sources, many of the materials I referenced were from leading AI theorists, so like Yoshua Bengio, Stuart Russell, Max Tegmark, Eric Drexler, etc. And it just goes to show that this, even though I've been kind of saying that the emphasis in the discourse is around technical alignment, that does seem to be like a broader consciousness, but it tends to be more in like podcasts or footnotes or blog posts rather than like the research agendas or the main thrust of the book. And so by actually extracting these more offhand remarks, I'm hoping to like crystallize what I see as like already the implicit paradigm within AI. Coming from a philosophical background, I was also kind of drawn to like the intellectual history behind these ideas. So classically, there's this social ontology called mechanism that conceptualizes like human society and the universe as machines. So like Newtonian physics is sometimes referred to as like viewing the universe as a kind of clockwork. Or there's this essay by a French philosopher around the 18th century called "Man is a Machine," that is saying that man is not distinct from like is not separate from universal laws, but he functioned mechanically. There's also a trend of thought in the philosophy of mind that conceptualizes the mind as a form of computer, as an information processing system. And so really this new wave of using the machine intelligence metaphor is an update of an earlier form of mechanism. And so this is a kind of like it's quite a significant shift in the history of technology. Finally, one of the other projects that I considered but didn't pursue as much as I perhaps would have liked is this notion of creating a new forum that is trying to integrate the humanities and social sciences with STEM and really try and launch this emerging area of like multi-agent complex systems research. And so my kind of overarching umbrella for this was coordination forum. My kind of motivation for this was that I've been on Less Wrong and Effective Altruism and the AI Alignment Forum. And while some of these discussions might take place, they tend to be more fringe or not as well received. And I think this is in part because the forums are just more specialized towards like technical AI safety research or towards rationality or cause prioritization. Whereas this field is a lot more interdisciplinary. And so I thought it'd be valuable to have a forum dedicated to that wider topic. And I think one of my early thoughts was just having an AI governance forum, and that would be the supplement to the AI alignment forum. But I thought this frame of coordination was a lot broader and also encompassed other issues like nuclear risk and the climate crisis and AI for democracy and epistemics. And so I thought to just call it AI governance was like narrowing the frame of the kind of research that's needed. I think particularly as AI is integrated into critical societal systems, it will be less as if AI is like a separate issue, that it will just become like part of governance without even having to add the qualification of AI. So I kind of put together like a kind of concept map of everything that I thought was revolving around this notion of coordination. So in kind of brainstorming, I also was trying to draw on a lot of the recent developments in the space. So gradual disempowerment explicitly makes a call for what they refer to as ecosystem alignment at the end of the paper. The intelligence curse also talks about the need for new types of institutions and coordination mechanisms. And so these are very recent developments that occurred just prior to the research fellowship. And so it's really like the frontier of research. And I get the sense from looking at the response to this on like Less Wrong and the AI Alignment Forum that there's some kind of reservation or like missing exactly what these pieces are getting towards. And so there's this kind of consideration of like how much you want to try and convince the people already in this space versus trying to create a new space where people are coming there specifically for this this project. I also was doing more kind of conceptual engineering that's more periphery to this central like civilizational superintelligence alignment frame. So one that I kind of liked as a metaphor for gradual disempowerment is what I refer to as the ship of Theseus of the state, that was taking these two classical philosophical metaphors. So the first, the ship of Theseus, is like well known in kind of the problem of identity, that there's a ship and over time you have to replace its planks and its sails, and over enough time all the parts of the ship are replaced, and the question is it still the same ship? Then there's the ship of the state, which is this metaphor from Plato of a ship. The state can be thought of as a ship with like the captain as the statesman or the politicians, the political leaders, and then the crew as the population. And that sometimes there are mutinies where like the population will overthrow or like choose a new captain. And I was kind of merging these two to look at how across civilizational time, the state reproduces itself. And so over time, the entire crew and the entire political class is replaced by the next generation. And so that's the kind of ship of thesis of the state across human civilization. And this was fairly stable because each generation was had like the same cognitive abilities and or like roughly, and then there was kind of technological change that enhanced it, but it was within broadly human parameters. But what you get with the AI transition is AI agents replacing the human components of the ship. So it's going from having a kind of like a wooden to like an iron or even a kind of biological substrate to now like a silicon substrate. And so it's becoming like a radically different ship. And so it no longer passes this this test of the ship of Theseus. And I was kind of viewing this as like a way of communicating gradual disempowerment. Perhaps it's quite niche for like a philosophical audience, but I could see if you like I thought of getting a video made for like rational animations that was like well written and engaging, and had this kind of visual of the ship sailing and then like it being accelerated by the advent of AI. So yeah, there you have it, a kind of an illustration. I think this kind of like imagery and narrative tend to be like underplayed in this space. And so I was trying to kind of compensate for that. Okay, I think that will do. Yes, yeah. Let's end there. I'm willing to open it up to questions and discussion if people have anything they'd like to say.
Hey, I've got a question, Max. Thanks for the talk. Do you think there are like kinds of gradual disempowerment that might be desirable?
Yeah, so I think this is something that there isn't really a clear distinction made in the paper between like it's more or less assumed that gradual disempowerment is bad. I think there are some kind of notes. But if AI agents have more wisdom and more of an ability to handle the complexity of reality and the unpredictability of the future, then it might actually be kind of immoral for us to retain leadership and be making decisions that aren't as informed as AI systems are. And so this again is a kind of classical debate in political philosophy of are there legitimate hierarchies and should we defer to experts? And so like Plato thought that the ruling class should be made out of philosopher kings. And so perhaps we could see like emerging AI agents as like becoming philosopher kings. And that they might function as like benevolent paternalists that will like overrule us in our like immaturity. And so yeah, I mean this is obviously not very popular in the public imagination, that will voluntarily give up control. But perhaps this is just like a crucial consideration that is a lot of people are missing. Dusan.
As a philosopher king myself, I want to defend the paper in something like, well, in worlds in which AI is benevolent and wise, we don't need to worry. and in worlds in which it's not, like, and maybe like there's relative likelihood of AI is wise and we have done so much limiting of it that it's unable to bring forth a great future, versus AI is not aligned or not wise or both, and is tricking us into doing its bidding. And I don't know, maybe it's just like a felt sense of, well, the bad ending is like far more probable than us subverting the good ending or something. But yeah, that is like, I don't know how I would think about it. I suppose question would be like, this was just a comment. I don't know if you have a comment on the comment.
Yeah, so I guess what I take you as saying is that we still want some kind of like way of mediating or constraining even a benevolent like superintelligence, and that it's not just enough to kind of offhand all decision making and like trust it. But there should be, yeah.
In a sense, in the worlds in which the AI is benevolent and we give up power just because we believe it's benevolent, we're like defecting to our other selves, which are in the worlds with the malevolent AI, and are defecting as and are like ceding power to the AI when they shouldn't have, or something. So I would say in all worlds we should like not cede power by default until we're sure which world we're in, or something.
Yes, yeah, and it seems there isn't like that tremendous of a moral cost by just slowing down. Because like one problem here might be that we just get kind of stuck, and we do the AI, the superintelligence wants to do something, and we're just like, but we don't want to like lose our control because like we're not completely convinced of this, and then you just get stuck in that state for like possibly a long time, and there's like a moral cost to not have like making that action. I'm talking quite abstractly, but I mean, so I'm kind of like applying this to like human civilization right now, which is it broadly has this liberal bias towards non-interference and like cultural relativism, that we should just allow other societies and cultures to coexist with our own, because they have equally like reasonable like moral beliefs. And so right now we're kind of in this position where like perhaps there is already like a moral hierarchy that like some cultures are more advanced than others, and we're just not willing to like overrule them in like a coercive way. But then you could end up that the entire future light cone like perpetuates this equilibrium, because we weren't willing to like intervene earlier on and like correct the initial conditions. And so this is where there's kind of a double bind, because it's like, what if we intervene and we're actually just mistaken, and then it's this like totalitarian like hellish nightmare that we've just committed, and it was actually like misguided and for nothing, or we allow like that other cultures to like continue to exist, and they like proliferate, and now there's like billions of people that are subscribing to certain moral beliefs that like cause suffering. And so there's like a double bind where we might kind of be like screwed either way. Like it's a question of like picking your poison.
Yeah, thanks. We have audience questions. Atarva, I've allowed you to unmute. You can ask your question.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Can you all hear me?
Yes, yeah, you're good.
Wonderful. So this does seem to be a fairly new sort of quote unquote pre-conceptual whatever space. And it does seem like a lot of the stuff that people are doing right now is along the lines of conceptual engineering. Is that primarily the sort of stuff that's happening? Are people working on some other things? What does, I don't know, quote unquote, working in this space look like? Because it does seem like just sort of disentangling a bunch of mush right now.
Yes, yeah, I think it is very like pre-paradigmatic. There have been some like recent papers on like full stack alignment, which kind of maps onto like my notion of vertical alignment. or like what other people call socio-technical alignment. So again, there's a lot of jargon and like new terms and people using different terms to refer to the same thing. I think the Meaning Alignment Institute, which were like the central organization behind that paper, they have some more like technical proposals for how to actually apply this. So that's something that you can check out. I'm not that like, I haven't really like looked too deeply into that, and like partly because when I skimmed it, I wasn't that impressed. I think there's for me personally, I'm viewing I'm coming from what is like the meta crisis space, which is like kind of on the periphery of EA and Less Wrong, and like there are some forum posts that mention this. Another frame for this is like meta existential risk, which is like instead of looking at like AI and bio and nuclear as like discrete risks that should be addressed through like targeted interventions that are like particular to the particular risk, then you look at the underlying drivers and causes. So this might be like military economic competition, and then like the political units of nation states, and the like culture of like nationalist ideology. And this is like a much deeper diagnosis, and is looking at like the very like structure and culture and history of civilization. And so prescriptively, then the project is one of like civilizational design and transition. So like how would we steer the world towards a place where like there aren't these competing states, and people no longer subscribe to these imagined communities or collective fictions of like the US and China that is producing this collective action problem. And so I think this is like, again, it's still quite pre-paradigm, but it's gesturing towards like an actual like research agenda.
Thank you.
Any last questions? I suppose my last question is, what is your internal felt probability that this is a solvable thing? Like, even theoretically solvable. Like, yeah, we can figure out how to untangle all of this and then actually apply it. Not only in time, but like in infinite time or something.
Yeah, so I think there's a sense in the discourse that like everything is impossible, that like the technical alignment problem is impossible, like if we all build it, everyone dies. And then there's this sense that the governance problem is also impossible, because like how do you stop nation states that have like powerful militaries and have or how do you stop corporations that have these like commercial imperatives and they just want to maximize profit, and that we're kind of in the, it's a very Lovecraftian, like mechanistic and like agency denying philosophy. Yeah, I guess like there's some kind of consolation in looking at the history of the world, that like we have solved collective action problems previously, and there has been this trend from like tribes to city states to kingdoms to nation states, and so perhaps there's this trend towards greater unification, and that like civilization, whilst like I suspect at each of those stages, the idea that you would like give up your like that in 200 years time the four kingdoms of England would become the United Kingdom, that would just have been kind of seen as an impossible like fantasy. And so I think there's a certain underestimation of our like our contingent positioning in the historical process. And so that's more a kind of meta narrative. I also think something that's underappreciated is how like AI could actually not just accelerate negative trends, but could like improve our capacity to solve these problems. And so like what if like everyone on in the rival states suddenly had like an AI tutor or therapist, and like becomes like highly educated and develops like a more cosmopolitan worldview where they stop kind of seeing themselves as like a Chinese or US citizen. And also if you factor in like automation freeing up people's time and people perhaps having a UBI. So I think there's so many kind of unpredictable like events that could take place that could radically change the kind of timeline that we're in. And just right now, like we're just extrapolating like the status quo rather than considering like all possible futures.
Yeah, cool. Brave of you to think civilizational progress is good.
Yes.
I like it. All right. And with that, let us close this talk.